Hey everybody, my name is Jared Thomas and welcome to Three Creeks Church. Today we're keeping the conversation going about racism in America. This isn't an easy subject to talk about, and so on the front end, we'd love to ask for your grace and understanding as we talk about racism and what role we play as individuals and as the church in eliminating it. Today, our lead pastor, Joel Trainer, sits down with our Connections pastor, John Scott. We hope that through this conversation, above all, you'll be pointed to a God that loves every person on earth more than we can possibly understand.
Three Creeks family, what's up? My name is Joel and I get to be the lead pastor here. I'm with our Connections pastor, John Scott IV.
That's right.
And today we're going to keep the conversation going about racism, a topic that has definitely kept going.
Right.
An issue, just because a few months ago, the issue of racism was on the front news everywhere. It was the thing to talk about. I think people are talking about it a little bit less as time has gone on, but we as a church, we want to keep the conversation going because we know that the issue of racism is still plaguing our country. And I want to start off this conversation just by simply recalling the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 5 when he says, he's talking to people that are going to follow him, and he says, "You're the light of the world. You're a city on a hill." And all through the New Testament, you see this image of, Christians, we're supposed to be a light in the world, exposing and eliminating the darkness.
Right.
Racism is darkness. It is evil, it's prevalent, and it plagues us. And as a Christian, as a church, we want to be a part of eliminating that and eradicating the darkness that is racism. So I said something a second ago, and you nodded, racism hasn't gone away. Maybe.
For sure. Yeah. So, this has been an issue that has plagued our nation since the beginning. So you're talking about 400 years of slavery, then you come up against like Jim Crow, segregation. You can go through so many eras where racism was prevalent. And nowadays, I would say it's just racism over the years has just constantly evolved, just metamorphed, I guess, for another term. Like it just has changed its different form, but it's never has been an issue that we have dealt with. And so it's silly for us to think, or it would be silly for any of us to think that without dealing with it, without addressing it, because I believe that this is one of the times we can say in the history of our nation that this has been something that has really been addressed or looked at, or people are just going like, whoa, like what is this? And are seeking answers to want to try to solve things. I think this is probably one of the biggest times in the history of our nation. And so like, without it being addressed, it can never be fixed. So we're talking about years and years of this stuff being prevalent in our nation. It's going to take some time to get rid of that because of a George Floyd, a video, or something that we saw initially, that in us talking about it for a couple of months, that is not going to heal years of this issue being around. Yeah.
Obviously, it's been something I'm sure you have had countless conversations in the last few months about this. And when I say, hey, let's keep the conversation going, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. I really, man, I'm telling you, throughout this whole deal, I've had so many mixed emotions. Yeah. I have great days where I'm like, let's talk about this. Let's push the needle forward in the right direction. And I have days where I'm like, I can't. I am exhausted. I have no answers to give you in this moment. I'm just tired of having to be the one to try to give some solutions to, frankly, an issue. I go, people who look like me we weren't initiators of it. And that's just the reality of it. And so, I have days where, I'm excited to be that soundboard for anyone who's seeking understanding of maybe how I may feel as an African-American male here, growing up here in America. Or, and then there are days where, I think I've even shared some stuff with you where I'm just like, I can't do it today.
Yeah.
Like I just really
Yep.
I can't. So
Yep.
it's mixed emotions.
Not only am I assuming that you've had so many conversations about this, I'm also going to just go out on a limb and assume that someone along the line has asked you, like, but John, what do I do? You know, like, I'm learning. Everybody's talking about how they're learning and listening.
Right.
What do I do?
Yeah.
How do you feel, be honest, about somebody saying, John, what do I do?
Yeah. In my sense, man, when I'm having conversations pertaining to that question with my white brothers and sisters, typically, I fight like heck, I promise you, to put myself in their shoes and try to really hear their heart and push past all the weeds of what they're really trying to ask.
Yeah.
But that question phrased that way comes across to a lot of African Americans as like, just you give me the solution. I know this is an issue that has affected you and you feel like oppressed and like weighed down and bogged down by this, but while you're bogged down by this, also help me figure out what I need to do. And it's just like, it can come across as insensitive. And so I think the example I use a lot of times is a lot of us had group projects in college, and none of us liked the individual that came to the group project that had not done any research to contribute to the overall group project as a whole. None of us.
That was me, John. You're talking about me.
But we honestly, none of us, we didn't like that person. And so that's what it can almost feel like when that question is asked. It's like, yet we say read and do stuff, like come to the conversation, and maybe ask that question, but say, hey man, this is some stuff that I've been reading about and researching on my own, and I just want to gain some clarity from a friend that has, been, hurt by this or is just going through it.
It almost feels like we, and I put myself in the category because I've asked the question, like, we want the easy way out, the easy answer, just tell us what to do. And you're saying it's not that easy. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a lot of work.
For sure.
On our side, if you will. One of my favorite things about you is that you don't see this as just a hot issue. You don't see this as primarily a political issue. You don't see it as primarily a cultural issue. I just have heard you say so many times that at the heart of this, it's a gospel issue.
For sure.
And I think we as a church would be so thankful if you would break that down for us and explain what you mean.
Yeah. So I hands down believe that this is an issue that's near and dear to the heart of God. That if Jesus was here on earth, walking on earth today, that he would not be in the politics of everything. He would not be off in the distance, like handling certain issue, or he would be immersed in tackling this issue. And so like, I believe as we break down like just sectors of the gospel and what the gospel is, I pray that it opens up the eyes of believers to see like, this is really an issue, a gospel issue, an issue that's near and dear to the heart of God. And if it's near and dear to his heart, as a follower of him, it has to be near and dear to mine. So I can't afford, whether I'm exhausted, I'm tired of the conversation, whether I lack understanding, like I have to find this isn't an issue I can sit on the sideline with as a believer. And so when we talk about it being a gospel-centered issue or a gospel issue, period, one, the gospel is family-oriented. And what I mean by that is like God created us, he adopted us, he engrafted us into his family. We can look throughout the entire Bible where we are called sons and daughters of God, those of us who put our hope and trust in Jesus Christ. And in that, in a family, being engrafted into the family of God, in a family, man, you have the opportunity to really become close throughout proximity, like with one another. You're able to work through issues and difficulties that may arise in your family. And if that stuff is done correctly, like it does nothing but pushes you and bond you guys closer and closer together. So that's one aspect that is very family oriented. Number two, I believe that it's inclusive. The gospel is inclusive. It's for everyone, right? That I believe that the gospel runs to the need of the broken people, especially people of oppressed. We have been oppressed by sin, and God in that looked down and approached that with Jesus. And sending his son like to free the oppressed by sacrificing his son, Jesus Christ. And so I go, if he went through measures to do that through his son, like, I should follow suit, right? As a believer.
Yeah.
And this should be something like when I feel as though people aren't being included or represented in a way that's honoring, that I can't be quiet as a believer. I have to say something.
Yeah.
Another thing, I believe the gospel is justice seeking. I believe Jesus died on the cross to get justice for the Father of the sins of man. Yeah. I wholeheartedly believe that. I don't believe he didn't ignore it in hopes that time would make it go away, as some of my people like to say, of just, well, when this generation dies off, then this race issue will be taken care of. No.
Hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't yet. He was proactive. Jesus, the Father, sought justice through his son, Jesus. And with that being an example given to us from the Father, I believe we have to follow suit. Seeking justice in this world should be on the heart of every believer.
Yeah. John, I think you explaining that to me and me hearing your heart even over the last few months. I remember when a lot of this came out a few months ago, it came out to me. It's not a new issue for you.
Right.
It came out to our country. It was on the front page everywhere. And it seemed like everybody had something to say. We took the posture of, like, we said a little bit about it, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't just adding to the noise and talking about it because it's a hot issue. Mm-hmm. We wanted to talk about it, and we wanted to, kind of like this little series is called, like, keep the conversation going. Mm-hmm. I know for me, it's hard to keep the conversation going because I'm not really sure what to say sometimes. I'm not really sure what to do. I see somebody try to say something helpful and they just get crushed.
Right.
So the question for me, John, is how do I engage with this that actually is helpful and actually makes you feel like I am authentically supportive and genuinely wanting to eradicate racism?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know my white brothers and sisters probably have heard this response a million times, but we're going to keep saying it because I think it's very important. You have to educate yourself. Okay. Like, you have to take the time, whether it's reading books, having people that look different than you come over your house, having the tough conversations, being okay with it being uncomfortable, and maybe you looking like being the ignorant one in the thing, like in the whole conversation, like being okay to enter into that space. And I pray that on the flip side, for your African American friend or friend of color, period, will embrace you and be that soundboard for you to have that space to be ignorant of just not knowing. Yeah. I think it also heavily comes with we're not okay. It's not okay anymore. And I've said this since this whole thing has sort of kicked off for our world. Or for our country, that it's not okay just to be like to say I'm not a racist. Kudos, that's great. Like I'll give you like 2 taps for that or so. Like we need anti-racist people that are gonna be in a space where Nana and Gaga say something because of just like where they came from and that sin issue and stuff not being dealt with. They may say something that's like very racist, and you speak up and say something instead of going, well, that's just how Nana is, and that's just how Gaga is. It starts within the home as well. Yeah. You as an individual educating yourself, you doing that with your family, and when I feel like when the family is educated, then a city can be, or a community can be transformed. When a community or city is impacted and transformed, that can leak over into the whole state, and so forth and so on. Yeah. And so I think people they ask that question with like, and they want to see this huge tangible plan of like where I can measure every little bit. And I just go, let's just start with the small things of you working on yourself first and foremost, you calling out stuff within your own family, you addressing stuff, reading books or doing stuff with your kids to help them understand and see the full picture. Yeah. Let's start there.
It's good. It's good. You know, you shared something with me that I would say of all the conversations that I've had with anybody over the last 3 or 4 months, specifically on the topic of racism, you said something to me that pierced me, and I have not been able to shake it. And it was this. It was in response to me saying, you know, John, I just have a lot more to learn than I have to say. And that sounds really humble.
It's good.
I'm proud of myself for saying that. And I just, honestly though, if I'm just being honest, like that was my free pass to go like, I don't know enough, so I'm not going to say. And you were kind, but you were pointed, and you said, that's fine, and that's okay if you're there now. And so I guess I'm passing that on. Like, that's fine. Like, if you feel that way now, that's okay. But you said to me, you can't stay there.
Right.
You can't perpetually just say, I've just got more to learn than I have to say, and you can't stay quiet forever. I'm in the process of reading a book called The Myth of Equality. And in the first chapter, there's a quote that says that endless conversation is a tool of the privileged. And when I read that, I thought, that's what I'm opting into.
Yeah. I'm
choosing this endless conversation, and I'm just saying, I'm just learning. And at some point, you got to go, I have to go, I've read, I've watched, I've learned, and now I have something to say.
Right.
And that's uncomfortable for me. It is, and I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
And I always do want to have a genuine posture of like, there is more for me to learn than I have to say.
For sure.
That's still true. But I've learned enough that I do feel like I do want to say a few things. You kind of mentioned Nana and Gaga, not my grandparents, not what I called my grandparents, but I've thought some about my grandparents over the last few months, and I go, man, they loved God. They believed in Jesus. I believe they're in heaven because of that. But I'm not proud of the way that they interacted with and maybe had prejudices or stereotypes or racism towards people that didn't look like them.
Right.
And that's uncomfortable for me to say, because I want to honor them and I want to honor my parents who also love Jesus. But I think that it's not okay for me to go, you know what, that's just how it was in the 40s and 50s. As a Christian, I've got to go, like, that was wrong, that was sin, and I think that if my grandparents, who I believe are in heaven right now, could come back, they would be shaking me and saying, Joel, it's nothing like this in heaven.
That's good, yeah.
Like when I read the book of Revelation and I see every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every color, all together worshiping Jesus, I think my grandparents would be the ones that would come back and go, like, repent on my behalf for the way that I viewed people. Maybe it was cultural at the time, but still, it's sin. It's repent on my behalf, because that's not the way that it is in heaven. My role is to raise my children to see people how God sees people.
Yeah.
If I could be the end of racism and prejudices and stereotypes, if my kids only see the beauty in diversity, if my kids see people how God sees people, all created in the image of God, then I've played a crucial role in this.
Right.
And that might be the role that a lot of people play, and that might be the only role that some people play.
For sure, and it's something. It's moving the needle forward.
Right.
It's doing something that, if we're honest, has really haven't been intentionally done since this whole thing kicked off years and years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to look at that as like, okay, I hear that, but like, it's got to be something else. Like, no, that's a big thing.
That's a big thing.
It's huge.
For me, I was just journaling the other day, writing down some things that I felt like I could do as a father in trying to stop all of it, even if there's just like a little bit of it.
Yeah.
There is. And if I want to stop it, it looks like me having books that I read my kids with, where they're all not white.
Right.
That starts with me having people that don't look like us into our home for meals and inviting them over. That looks like me celebrating other countries and other cultures rather than turning my nose up at it and saying that's different. It looks like me not ignoring skin color differences, but celebrating them and
Right.
saying it's beautiful. And then the hardest one for me, those ones, they're not that hard. I can get on Amazon and find the books that I'm supposed to buy and read them. That's not that hard. The hardest one for me is when I see racism and injustice, I say something.
Right.
And I say it even to the people that I love the most, people that I believe in, but people that I know are wrong.
Yeah.
And because I want my kids to grow up and read the Bible and know the gospel, see how God sees people,
Yeah.
and watch me as their dad and go, oh, he believes in that. Like his life and his actions, it lines up with the heart of God. Like my dad sees people like God sees people. And if I could give that to my kids, like I see that as my role,
Right.
one of my roles, but certainly a big part of my role right now.
That's good. That's good. And I think I appreciate you sharing that. And on one end too, I think what's very important and vital for all of us is to self-evaluate, do self-evaluation, man. Like, where am I when it comes to some of these prejudices and biases in my own life? And let me speak to Joel self. Let me speak to John on that and fix that. Yeah, call out other people as well when I see racism. Right. But I have some prejudices and some biases myself.
Right.
That I'm gonna say for some people, it wasn't intentional, that it was like that it's probably in you, but it was never dealt with and it was just passed down.
Right.
Something of like, I may just clench my purse, or what's that eerie feeling that I feel when I'm in an environment where most people don't look like me. I tense up and I may be a little nervous. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Get to the heart and the root of that, and deal with that even personally in your own life. Like, those are some big key things. But
it's good for you've been a mirror for me, because I've been so thankful for your friendship over the last few months. But just in having conversations with you, I've just become aware of how quick I am to speak against other injustices. I mean, I'll call sin all the time, but racism, man, my first move is to, maybe I'm just going to stay out of that conversation. And God sees it as evil as all these other things that I'm quick to condemn. And as a follower of Christ, my role is to step in and go, like, in my own life and in someone else's that I see, if I see something, say something, and stop taking a back seat so often.
For sure.
Man, I feel this way, and I know that so many people in our church feel this way. You and your wife, Keandria, are a gift to our church. Your wife is actually wiser than you.
That she is.
And my wife is wiser than me. And so the good thing is this conversation isn't going to, we're not the only ones going to have it. Our wives, Morgan and Keandria, are going to talk next week. Here's a 1-minute clip of their conversation next week here at Three Creeks.
What does that look like to engage in that conversation about white privilege?
It doesn't mean that you haven't had to work hard for what you've achieved.
Yeah.
It does not mean that you won't have to continue to work hard. What it does mean is that you have not had to, your entire race generally had to be disadvantaged because of the color of your skin. That is just a reality of just what has taken place for Black Americans, is that there has been this level of disadvantage. That doesn't mean that you were the one who made that happen.
Sure.
But you have benefited from it. You can use your white privilege, your platform, to bring good to your brothers and sisters of color.
Well, for sure, that's going to be an amazing deal with our wives on there, and I don't want you guys to miss it. It's going to be great. Make sure you tune in to that next week. But just some final remarks that I have as we've talked about keeping the conversation going, and I think early on we hit on a lot of just like how this is a gospel issue. I know it can be exhausting for people. I know it can be tiresome, Black, white, Hispanic, whatever race you may be within this conversation, but it's very vital, obviously, as we talked about today, that we keep the conversation going. And as we fight hard to do that, I want to share just two scriptures that I cling closely to help push me through the fatigue and the tiredness of this all.
Yep.
Galatians 6:9 is one of them. And that verse just simply talks about not growing weary in doing good, for in due season you'll reap a harvest if you don't give up.
Yeah.
And so I hold tightly to that verse because I go, this is something like, as we're making strides and doing good and pushing the needle in the right direction around this racism conversation, I don't want to grow weary in doing good, because scripture tells me that if in due season, there's a harvest that we'll get to reap, but we can't give up.
Yeah.
And so if I allow my exhaustion and me becoming tired and like, man, I'm sick of having this conversation, like I'll just paralyze me to just stop and not want to continue to push forward, man, I just go, man, that we'll never get to reap the harvest.
Yeah.
And I pray that as believers, all of our hearts would be, man, I want to reap that harvest. I want to, whether I see it one day or not, I have a picture in my mind of like what I want the end to look like as far as us being unified together. And then the second verse that I think about is found in Hebrews 12, verses 1-2, but I'll just go on 2. It just talks about like, for the joy set before Christ, like it was the author and perfecter of our faith, the joy set before him, like he endured the cross. And I think about that verse and I go like, man, what was the joy set before Jesus and dying this horrific death on the cross? And what I honestly believe it is Jesus saw this amazing picture of a people being reconciled back to the Father through his sacrifice on the cross. And he allowed the joy from that picture to push him through the hardship of the rugged cross that he died on. And so I think what will be great for us as a body, as believers, to ask ourselves is, what's the end picture that we want to see when it comes to this issue? And allow that picture to be the fuel to push you past the fatigue, the exhaustion of having uncomfortable conversations, of constantly educating yourself on this, of being in a space and just going like, I just don't know, but I want to know, I want to learn. Like, allow that picture, whatever it is, when you sit down, maybe later on today or later on this week, allow and come up with that picture, allow that picture to be the fuel that, man, pushes you past all the exhaustion and the tiredness of this deal. And let's really continue to fight to see that Jesus will come in and really do a work in this situation that only he could do. I want to see it. I know you want to see it. And I believe that even, and I'll say this, even if I don't, man, I think of Moses, who didn't even get a chance to go into the promised land, right? I just go, even if I don't get to see like the end product of this deal, man, I still don't feel like that gives me a pass to just sit on the sideline and not do anything to push needed for. Not fight at all. So,
it's great.
I'm excited for it.
Thanks for having this conversation. And I want to keep the conversation going with you. We're going to keep it going next week with our wives.
Right.
And that won't be the end of it.
Not at all.
Because the issue is still real, and as a church, we want to eradicate it.
For sure.
Love you, man. Thanks, Three Creeks. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, we'd love for you to share it. You may have some questions about something Joel or John said, and we'd love to do our best to answer those questions. You can email either one of them. Their email addresses are on the screen now. And they'd love to hear what questions you have. And the good news is this conversation doesn't stop here. Next week, Morgan Trainer and Keandria Scott sit down and keep the conversation going. Thanks for tuning in to Three Creeks. To find out more about our church or give online, visit threecreekschurch.com.